Hey, this is Kate. I'm a forensic psychologist and crisis clinician, and I collect stories. Everything from true crime to trauma to parenthood. Turns out there's a lot more in common between anxiety and sociopathy, or between serial killing and podcasting, than you might think. Are you sure you really want to know? This is Ignorance Was Bliss at IWB Podcast on social media and IWB.com.
Welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. Thank you for tuning in to another special episode. Kathy Kleiner has been through so much in her life, and on top of everything, she was brutally beaten by Ted Bundy in Florida after he escaped from prison and went on a rampage at her sorority house, Chi Omega. This is Kathy's story.
Well, I wanted to welcome you and just tell you how much that I admire you and you're an inspiration. So I'm really glad to be talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And I know you had a tragic event when you were 5.
Yes. I lived in Miami, and my first and only really memory of my daddy was he would come home every evening in Miami, and we had a small house and we had big fans on the floor that were always going on. And he'd come home and he would get a cigar and sit in his big leather chair. And between us was a little table and then my little chair. We played Chinese checkers every night. That was our night. And I think he must have let me win sometime. I don't remember now, but so it was a fond memory that I have. And then one night he just didn't come home, and I'm looking out the window. And the next night he didn't come home. And my mama said, honey, he's not coming home. He's in heaven with Grandpa. And, I'm like, well, I want to go too. I didn't understand. And Mom was going through her own things mentally. And so she, she kind of let me figure it out on my own. And I said, well, if Dad's not going to be here, then this is what it's going to be now. At 5, I'm saying, well, it's my brother, my sister, me, and my mom. Yeah. And, that's what it's going to be. Although I always looked behind me for Daddy, and he just never showed up. But, that's the first thing I remember of having to go through and get over it.
Yeah.
Get over it. So,
wow.
My stepfather adopted us, my sister and I, and he was wonderful. He was like 6'2", and we're all little. My mom is like 5'2", and I'm 4'11 and a half. So we were a small family. And when my stepfather came in, and he just wrapped his arms around our family and put us all back together. And he was wonderful. He just was my dad. As we, he just turned into my dad immediately. And it was so nice to have a happy home now, and it morphed into lonely and scared into a happy family. Aww. So that was a good thing, out of being scared for Daddy being gone to having a new dad and that kind of happiness. Yeah. When I was 13, I was in the 6th grade. I remember toward the end of the year, I was always feeling sick. I didn't want to go and play. I would sit with the teacher doing PE, and I always had a little fever. I started getting these rashes on my cheeks. And Mama knew something was wrong with me, but she didn't know what. So she took me to the pediatrician, and he knew something was wrong with me, and he didn't know what it was. So he suggested Mama take me down to Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami. and to figure out what it was. I actually went in that day and stayed in the hospital for 3 months. I was finally diagnosed with systemic lupus, and that form of lupus attacks your organs. And in my case, it attacked my kidneys.
Oh, wow.
I was there, and it took so long for them to diagnose me because I was so young at 13, and it was back and no one knew, it was back in the 70s, and no one put it together how to help me because, it was not something they had worked with before. So they gave me medication and all this stuff, and finally they allowed me to go back home to Miami with my family. And I didn't know, but they had told Mom and Daddy that because I was getting so sick so fast that I probably wouldn't make it the year. That, they didn't know what else to do for me. A little bit after that, a month or so, my family is Cuban. Mm-hmm. They lived in the Keys, and a doctor approached my mom and dad and said, I have an experimental dose of chemotherapy. I can try it on Kathy, or not. It's something that I've used in Cuba. And Mom and Dad were, okay, yeah, anything you can do if you can help my baby.
Right.
So in the fall, I was given that experimental chemo, and I would go down and have it done every couple of weeks down in the doctor's office. And I would get so sick. And it ended up, I lost all my hair. I was so weak that I stayed home my 7th grade. I had a homebound teacher who came in and took care of me as far as lessons and dropped off and would come back 2 weeks later and pick them up. So I would be home alone. My mama and daddy worked in Miami. We had moved to Fort Lauderdale. And so they were about an hour and a half each way from me. And they owned their own business there. So I was home alone a lot. And I remember I'd call dial zero to talk to the operator, to have someone to talk to, because I was so lonely. And sometimes they would talk, and other times they said, no, we're, real busy and we can't talk today. Aww. But I had a new puppy, and I just kind of lived like that. That was, it was okay. It was okay now. Being really sick and not being able to go out, not caring to go out. I was just so tired. My joints hurt. And it was something. At the end of the 7th grade, I talked my mama and my daddy to let me go out to church one Sunday because I hadn't been out in months. And, they agreed. So I went and put my pretty dress on, and my hair was wrapped up in a pretty scarf. We went to church, and then we went and had ice cream, and it was like the best day of my life ever. So after that, we went home, and less than 2 weeks later, I came down with shingles.
Oh, no.
So now I have shingles all over my face and my neck, and I'm already feeling puny because of, the chemo and everything. And I didn't think it'd get worse than that. I thought, this is it. I just don't want anything else. I don't want to keep going. And so I started, though, feeling better toward the summer of my going into my 8th grade. I started feeling better. The chemo had worked. My hair started growing in, my little peach fuzz. So beginning of the 8th grade, I did get to go to middle school. And it was great being out of the house. I was still very weak and didn't have a lot of energy, but I was out of the house. Yeah. So that was major for me. When I left middle school, I went to high school, and we went to Fort Lauderdale High School. It was great. I had new friends. No one knew who I was because I hadn't been with them a couple years. So no one knew. I had lupus and I was sick and everything. I was just like one of the other new kids. Yeah. So theater really opened me up and let me express myself. and I could act and be anyone I wanted to be, except that little sick kid that stayed home in 7th grade. And I loved it. I could just be anything and anyone. So I think it really helped me to come out of that stage in my life where I couldn't think of doing anything else but being in that state of mind. So I was in theater for 4 years, loved it. I made some very good friends. One of them was Scott Rubin, who we had theater, and another good friend of mine was Susie White. And they really stand out to me. So I graduated from high school, Fort Lauderdale High, and it was time to decide which college to go to. And there were 3 in Florida that I was interested in. I had friends going to all of them. And then I figured out, I looked at FSU, and I knew that is as far away from Miami as I could get and still get in-state tuition. Because now my mama moved back to Miami, and it was a good 9-hour drive, and I knew she wasn't going to pop in for the weekend.
Right.
And God love her, she was so protective of me, but she had gone through a lot with me, and I can understand it. I didn't like it at the time because I wanted to be, normal, but I was supposed to be, I am allergic to the sun. And I remember when I'd go out with my friends, she would run behind me with an umbrella over my head.
Oh my
so I didn't get to see sun, And I'm like, Mom.
Oh.
She was always trying to protect me, and, her baby wasn't going to get sick again or anything. So she was being a good mama. So I decided to go to Florida State, and there were a lot of friends from high school who went there. I lived in a dormitory that was all women. Of course, my mom didn't let me stay in a co-ed dorm. I lived on the 3rd floor, which was the nunnery, we called it. And, of course, guys weren't allowed upstairs. I remember hearing downstairs they were having panty raids, and all the guys were coming in. And my friends and I would get our panties and throw down the stairwell.
Oh, my gosh.
So, yeah, we were having a panty raid too.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
So I got to do a lot of stuff, participate in things my way.
Yeah.
So I moved into the dormitory in the fall of '76, and I went through Rush. Rush at a college is a time where the freshman girls that want to join a sorority, we all get dressed up, and there's a week. We might be in groups of 10, and we go to a sorority house, and we're sitting there, and we're talking to the sorority sisters, and they talk to us, and then we move on to another sorority house. So during that day, we're, doing different sorority houses and kind of getting the feel for them and them for us. And the next day, they whittled it down. So if you had 5 you liked and only 4 invited you back, you could only visit those 4. And then the next day, they made it down to 3. So you were going down to different sororities that were interested in you. And if you were interested, then you kept going to see them. I liked Cayo, and I thought I could fit in there, and it was a good fit. I knew Susie White from theater was a Cayo, but I didn't know in the background she was saying Kathy would be a good fit for us as a sister, and let's go ahead and invite her. And this whole time I'm thinking I made such a great impression on all the sisters that they just really, really wanted me. So that's the way that I went through Rush and joined Cayo. Yeah. So I was a pledge from the fall of '76. I got initiated as a sister in the spring of '77. So life was great. I was a sister. I had joined a little church group when I first started FSU. And it was called the Wesley Foundation. It was just a bunch of students that got together and some older people in the neighborhood. We'd go and play pool, and it was just a nice atmosphere to hang out in. And it was kind of interdominational, so it was just, anywhere and anyone who wanted to join. And that was a couple blocks down from the Chi-O house. So now I had friends at Chi-O and friends at the church, and I was feeling more confident with myself. And in the fall, one of my first elective classes I took was archaeology. And I remember we went for a dig, and it was hot, and I broke one of my fingernails. And I said, this is too physical of work. I can't do this. It's too hard. So I took that semester and didn't take the next one with it. I changed majors at that point. Yeah. And I did go into interior design. So that was the major that I was in, and loved it. Loved it. So the spring of 77, I was initiated as a sister, and I was to go to in the fall of 77 back to school. I didn't know, but my parents had made arrangements for me to move into the Chi-O house so that I would have my room there, and I would be with the house mother and all the sisters and everything, and it would be a better, safer place for me than living in the dormitory. Yeah. So I moved in the fall of 77. My roommate was Karen. We had, there must have been about 30 rooms or 25 rooms in the whole sorority house. It was 2 floors, and there were 2 hallways. And on each hallway, there were several rooms. And it was just right across from each other were the hallways. When I moved into my room, I was on the 2nd floor of the sorority house. My bedroom looked behind, which was the parking lot. So instead of being in the front, I was in the back of the sorority with the parking lot as my view. So Karen and I wanted to decorate our room, and we decided to go with different colors. So Mom and I went in December of 77 to go looking, to decorate my room. Yeah. My parents getting me into the sorority, they were so proud and so happy that I moved into the house because they felt it was so much safer for me to be in the sorority house than to be living in the dormitory. Yeah. And since then, I can't even imagine what angst they must have gone through, knowing that they put me in that house. Yeah. And never talked about it. I just hurt for them so much. And, it was just something they dealt with, and my heart broke for them. But, life was going on, and everything was going to be good. At that point, we had no idea what was going to happen. Yeah. So Christmas of 77, I went out with Mom, and we went shopping, and I bought a bedspread. It was pretty and white with green flowers on it and trees, and it was great. And I had a little green pillow I sat up with because in my room, when you first walked in, there were dressers on each side of the door. And next to those were our desk. Next to that was the footboard of our twin beds. Our headboard actually leaned against the back wall when you walked in. That whole back wall were windows, beautiful windows, large windows on the side in the back of the room. And we always had our curtains open because we hung plants on the curtain rods. Oh. And I remember a gray owl macrame hanger that we had a spider plant. You can see this room now. So we had gold carpet on the floor and brown furniture. And between our desks, we had a little foot locker, a foot truck that we kept. It was not very big, maybe 3 foot by 5 foot. And we kept things in it and stuff on top. So that was my room. Yeah. It was on the 2nd floor, and to get there, you had to go up this beautiful wooden staircase that when you open the sorority doors, or you're in the staircase right in front of it. So that was our room. We decorated it, and it was great. So came January 1978. I don't remember much of that week. I remember going to classes and taking electives, but I do remember the Saturday 14th of January. Woke up. It was cold and misty out, and I had fallen asleep with my yellow flannel nightgown and my socks, and so I got up to go to church. There was a little wedding at the church at 12, and it was just a small church, and it was a couple that we had known, and so 12 o'clock was the wedding, and then right after in the lawn was the reception. So I remember getting dressed, wearing my corduroys, big sweater, and looking out and saying, God, this is unfair. It's their day. We don't have a lot for them. It just would be nice if, the weather was better.
Yeah.
Went to the wedding. Afterwards, went outside, and the sun was shining. It was still so cold, but we were dressed warm. And it was a great reception outside. We all brought a hot lunch, and it was nice. It was a good thing to remember that day. Afterwards, a group of us from the wedding were going to go out to a movie or something. And since I live so close to Cayo, I just said, well, let me go home and change, and I'll meet you. I got home, and I opened the front doors, and there was maybe 4 or 5 sorority sisters standing there and talking and saying what they did that day and what they were going to go on a date with. And so everyone's just talking, and I got in the middle of it and talking, and then it kind of dissipated, and I went up to my room, second floor. My room was the second door on the left. The first door was Margaret Bowman's room. The second door was mine. Right across the hall was Lisa Levy's room.
Okay.
So I went upstairs, went into my bedroom, and decided to stay home and study for a test. My roommate also was sitting on her bed studying. So here we were listening to James Taylor on the music. It was great. It was,
Yeah.
So we're loving it. We're comfortable there. I'm sitting on my beautiful bedspread. And around 11:30, I think we decided to turn off the lights and go to sleep. So that night happened. And someone had gone into Margaret Bowman's room and hit her. And someone had gone into Lisa Levy's room and hit her. Someone opened the door into our bedroom. And as I'm sleeping on my left side, I heard the door swish on the carpet. And it kind of woke me up a little bit, just a little bit of a noise. The next thing I hear is a big stumble. And this person had tripped on that little locker that was between our beds because it was dark and he couldn't see it. So now I'm awake and I'm trying to focus. And all I saw was the silhouette or something standing in front of me. It was just like a big blur, but it was more, I could see it was someone. This someone was at my bedside, lifted his arm up above his head, and threw it down on my face so fast and so hard that it broke my jaw in 3 places, bit off my tongue. My cheek was cut open from the corner of my mouth to my ear. It just flapped open, and my teeth were shattered and moved. At that point, though, it was weird because the hit didn't feel like a hurt. It felt like a thud. It was like I was hit and it didn't hurt. And it's hard to explain, but that woke Karen up, my roommate. Yeah. So he just turned around basically and went to her side of the bed. He also hit her with what we knew now was a log, a piece of firewood that he had picked up outside that door before he entered the sorority house.
Oh my God.
So now we know that he had attacked us with a log, and Karen knew he was coming, had heard what was going on, so she put her arms up over her face. He hit her and broke her arm and also hurt her face, bones in her face. So now I was unconscious. I had passed out before. I'm waking up and I'm making noise. And this person came back on the other side on the other side of my bed, and he was going to attack me again. And I had drawn up into a little ball, just anticipating the next blow, squinching my eyes and waiting. And then it didn't come. He didn't hit me. And I opened my eyes a little bit, and I noticed that our room was full of light. It was like a light was shining in there. And this person standing up was looking at me and spooked and ran out the door. And I'm back in my little cringe, and the lights go dim, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I passed out again. I don't know how long I was there alone with Karen, also beat up, but I remember sitting up and yelling and screaming at the top of my lungs, please, please, somebody come in, someone help me. And all I was doing was making gurgling sounds because my jaw was completely just hanging on and the blood in my mouth. And at this point, my face hurt so bad. It was just like knives and hatchets, and it was just.
Oh my gosh.
So, like I said, I don't know how long I sat there like that, but someone had called 911. They came to our room. The light was on, and the police had no idea what carnage could have happened. They just didn't know. And there was wood, bark all around and in my face. And so they kind of put together that he had used a log when he came into and attacked us. Just before he attacked us, he had gone into Margaret Bowman's room. He went to her room first, attacked her with the log, beat her, strangled her, and then put the sheets up next to her chin so it looked like she was sleeping.
Oh my God.
He had then walked across the room, the hall, to Lisa Levy's room. He attacked her with the log, he raped her, he strangled her, and he actually bit her. And that bite mark would be the final thing that actually was used to convict him, because that bite mark matched his teeth exactly. So that's what's happening. And then he attacks us. And then I'm waiting. Light shows in. He runs out. I passed out. And then a cop was next to me when I woke up again, a police officer. And in all my scaredness and all my hurt, I saw a police officer. And I knew this guy wasn't going to come back again. I knew I was safe from that. I wasn't going to get hit again. The paramedics came, and they took care of me as best they could. And they carried me down the stairs, those wooden stairs that weren't so pretty anymore. And they carried me down, and we got to the foyer. The double front doors were open. They walked me out, and it was so cold. I had on blankets, and I was just freezing. And I looked up as I'm laying there, and the sky was black. I didn't see any stars or anything. But as I looked up, looking down at me were heads looking at me on the stretcher. And I just see these heads looking at me. And I remember thinking, what are they looking at, you know?
Yeah.
So I was on the stretcher, and I was going to the ambulance, and the lights were flashing from the fire trucks and the police cars and the ambulance, and there was noise, the squawking of the radios and people talking, and in my mind, I was at a carnival. I was someplace that I was okay. It was a safe place. It was somewhere I could go and not hurt and not be scared. And so I was at a carnival. Yeah. They took me into the ambulance, and the police officer came in the ambulance with me. And it was just like, you know, he was perfect for me. You know, I wanted to hold his hand. Of course I didn't, but just having him there was such a relief that I wasn't going to get hit again. So that's when they took me to the hospital. And I was cold and screaming. Of course, I couldn't, and everyone's, coming in my bedside and taking care of me, and I'm really scared. And they cut my beautiful flannel yellow nightgown off, and I'm thinking, once again, that's my new nightgown.
Yeah.
And I was scared, and I looked up, and there was this beautiful face looking down at me. And she said, "You're going to be okay, Kathy." And it was the girl that had gotten married on the 14th that I had gone to her wedding.
Oh my
She
God.
was a student. She was a nursing student, and she had to work the ER that night. And just little things like that in the middle of chaos just helped, just was a help in my heart.
I bet.
So then they took me to the surgery, and I have no memory of anything there, anything that was going on. I was taken to my room after surgery. I was in a single room, and there were flowers and cards, but I was by myself. And my parents living in Miami after they got the call so early in the morning. By the afternoon, they were in Tallahassee, and they were allowed to come in my room with my aunt and my girlfriend, and that's who I had in my room. I understand the sorority sisters were out there. They wanted to come in, but Mom said, not now, let her heal, again, being so protective of me.
Yeah.
So, that was my little group. And right outside the door was a police officer, and he sat on a chair, and he could look at me, and I'd look at him sometimes. But my face was so bandaged that it was around my face and my head because they had wired my jaw shut, and just so many injuries. And the police officers were there, the detectives, and they were asking me questions, and I couldn't talk, and I couldn't remember. So they decided to have a psychiatrist come to my room and actually hypnotize me.
Oh, wow.
So that I could, if possible, come up with something, any information that I could not come up with myself. And I remember them asking me questions and talking like this with your teeth closed.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember things. And then I started remembering things. I remembered him opening the door and tripping over the trunk and the light and all this stuff I could remember, and I thought I was lying or making it up because I'm telling it, and I had no memory of it happening.
Oh, wow.
So that is one reason why I know so much about that attack that night. And since the years, I can put more and more together as I think about it. So that's why my memory is clear of that night. So I was in there about a week in the hospital, and I was to go to the airport and fly with my mom and sister back to Miami, to our little house. On the way to the airport, we were in the police officer's car. They were unmarked. They took me and stopped in front of the sorority house. They wanted me to walk upstairs and see if anything was missing from anywhere in my room, so that if they caught him or them and they had something, there was a connection. And I didn't want to go. I was still bandaged. And a police officer took one elbow on each side and walked me up those stairs that now are really not good to look at. And I took one step at a time. And we got to the landing, and I turned the corner, and I saw yellow crime scene tape on Margaret's door. And across the hall was Lisa's and yellow crime scene tape. I didn't know that they had been attacked that night. I didn't find out for maybe a week or so later. So that didn't register that something else had happened that night. And I walked, and my room was right next to Margaret's, and there was yellow tape, and they moved it, and there were other people in the room. And they said, look around and see if anything's missing. I looked at my dresser, and all I could see was the black finger dust that they used for fingerprints.
Yeah.
I saw that everywhere, and I couldn't tell if anything was missing. And then I saw my desk. And then as my eyes followed down the wall, I saw my bed. And my bedspread was all mushed up in a little ball. And the blood on it was brown because it had dried. And my bed was covered in blood. And I thought, oh, my bedspread, it's roaring. You know, I don't know if I'm unusual or just this is where my mind took me, but my poor bedspread, you know.
Yeah.
So I turned around and I left, and they took me to the airport, and I flew home to our house in Miami, where my parents lived. Do you have any questions up to that point?
Well, when was the point where they asked you to come testify?
I was called to testify. This was 1978, and the trial was in 1979, in the late spring of 79. And that's when they wanted me to testify and at the trial. So that was an interesting incident.
Yeah.
To say that. We lived in Miami, and the trial was in Miami. So when it was my day to testify, I remember we were in the house, and Mama said, here, eat breakfast. And I'm like, no, I can't. I'm not hungry. She goes, eat breakfast. I said, okay. So I was doing anything Mama said at that point. And so I ate breakfast, and I went to get dressed, and I found this bright red dress that I wanted to wear. And so I wore my red dress, and we went to the courthouse, and there were trucks everywhere. There was press, the media everywhere. And so we walked in and went up to the third floor, and the witnesses had to stay in one little room by ourselves. It was a conference room. When I walked in, I saw the paramedics that had been by my side, two of the police officers that had been with me that night, and it was just like an old reunion because I just couldn't hold them hard enough and hug them. And they were the same way. They said, we didn't know if you would make it or not. You had such injuries. And, you know, and I told the police how much they meant to me and, you know, how they made me feel safe, and they were appreciative and that. So now it's my turn to go into the courtroom and testify. And they got me, and they put me in a little room that's behind where a judge sits, behind that wall. And I'm sitting there waiting, and then they come and get me to go into the courtroom to go sit in the witness box. And as I walked in, I'm facing the gallery, and I looked over to my side, and there's the jury, and they're all looking at me. And I'm looking at them, and now I'm feeling intimidated. And my eyes followed around the room a little bit, and I saw the prosecution table with a bunch of lawyers. And then my eyes followed a little bit faster, and I saw the gallery, and it was full. And then my eyes followed more, and there was the defense table. And sitting there was Ted Bundy with his lawyers at a long table. I went into the witness box, and I was sworn in, and I looked at him, and I stared at him. I didn't want to take my eyes off of him. I wasn't scared. I felt, I think, a little power because I was okay. I was on this side, and he was on that side. But he looked so cocky and so just, his eyes were almost smiling. I mean, he was just like, this was fun to him.
Yeah.
You know, so I had no idea what the prosecuting lawyers asked me. You know, I was just focused on Bundy. And when it was the defense turn to talk to me, I was asked one question. And that was, is this the man you saw standing next to your bed that night in Chi Omega? And I had to say, I don't know, because I never saw his face. Even when the light shone in our room, I was cringed into a little ball. And I was so upset because I wanted to help convict him. I wanted to be a voice that managed to put him down, and I couldn't. It still bothers me. I couldn't do it. So they walked me back into the little room, and I stood there, and I about threw up. I was just so nervous at that point that I had seen Bundy, that I had done all that. Oh my God.
I cannot imagine. Oh.
It was, I wasn't scared though, and I wasn't cocky, I wasn't scared, and I wasn't, it's weird. I just looked at him and felt a peace, I guess, that I knew he wasn't going to come get me. And I looked at him like sorry for him. I think that's a good way of putting it. So Mom and I left Daddy, and we went out and went shopping or did lunch or something the rest of the day. So that's my big memory of the trial. And everything flew back at me, while I'm in there, and the hurt, and everything I had gone through. And it kind of brought it up again. And then after that, it was pushed back down, and it was not going to affect my day. I never wanted it to affect my life. I was never going to live in a closed up room and be afraid to open the door. I wasn't going to do that. When Daddy died, I didn't crawl somewhere. I lived, I lived with now my stepfather. And then when I had lupus, and I survived that, and then I joined theater, and I had the best time. And this wasn't gonna put me down. This was not gonna lock me up in a little mental room.
Bernadette wants to know, at what moment did you know something bad was about to happen, since you were half asleep when he came in, and when did you realize, like, oh crap, my life is in danger?
That's good, because I think about that, and I don't know that there was one time that I felt that, because again, I was sleeping. I opened my eyes and it was blurry, and then it got the silhouette got closer and clearer, and I had no clue what was going to happen. And when he hit me and he used that piece of firewood and it thud, it was just like surreal, and it happened in slow motion, although it didn't. So I didn't have time to register that, he's dying. It never hit me. So when he had gone to Karen's side of the room and basically just turned around, it was maybe 6 feet between our twin beds, and he was going to hit me again. We didn't know this at the time, but it was Ted Bundy, and Ted never left victims alive. So by hearing me move around, he was going to come and hit me again.
Yeah.
And at this point, I was in my little cringe, as small as I could get, state of mind. And all I thought of was, don't hit me. It's going to hurt. I never thought I was in danger for my life. I just felt I was cowering and didn't want to get hit again.
Yeah.
But it never felt to me that I was going to die or anything. It was just too much of a go into a survival mode.
Right. And I guess that kind of answers Christy's question, because she wanted to know, what was going through your mind when you realized that his intent was to take your life. And she was wondering, like, did you shut down? Were you thinking of your mom?
Again, I didn't know who this was or what it was, or the first time he hit me and it was more like a thud, and I passed out at that point. Right. And then I heard him attacking Karen. And when I went into my little ball, I wasn't thinking of anyone or anything other than get as small as I could and, crawl under the bed or whatever it took. So all I was thinking was crawl into a ball and don't say anything. And, I didn't have enough time to think about anything. And I didn't want to yell because I thought that would be more of a reason for him to attack me. But it was just, so now I hurt. really bad. As I said, my face was killing me, and I was holding it, and the blood was around it, and not knowing everything. It was just a time that I think I froze. It was more of a freeze than a help me mode at that time.
Right. Well, Christy had another question, and she thought it was a weird question, but I get what she means. She wanted to know if Ted Bundy had a smell, because certain scents can trigger you back to a certain event. And did he have anything that spikes any of your senses that trigger you back to that time?
That's a good one to do. Well, it's weird because, no, I don't remember anything about a scent of his. Nothing. What I do remember, we talk about it, I remember it smelled like a dirty penny.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That's what I smelled, and it was the blood that was in my mouth and everything. And that's the best way I can explain it. It was like a dirty penny.
Oh, wow.
That was the smell that I remember, and that was me, not him.
Wow. Well, Christy asked, what do you think about, and how do you feel about, the hype around Ted Bundy and him being so sensationalized everywhere and people being fans of him?
Well, first off, I read everything I could about Bundy after the attack. I actually read Anne Rule's The Stranger Beside Me, who was also, I didn't know at the time, in the trial. She was at the in the gallery. But I wanted to know about Ted Bundy. I knew what we all knew about him, but I wanted to know the other side. And so I found out that he just lied about everything he was and was so manipulative. He just, he would steal clothes so that he could dress and look nice. And, he was into things that he wanted people to see. And I learned that, and I guess it helped me to know there were the two sides. It wasn't just like one thing. And, he had been sick as a child. He had killed things and things like that. And I think the notoriety is because that was the first time during that trial the media was allowed to be inside, be part of it. So, real time, it was happening. And a lot of people saw it, and a lot of people held on to that thought and just kind of let it build up in them, I think. And as far as young women being attracted to him, I kind of think I've read, and I tend to agree with it, that they were kind of feeling like if I went out with him, I could fix him. I could be like a mother figure, and I could make them all better. And I think that's one thought that I believe in. And the other is, I think these women may have always wanted to go out with a bad boy or be with a bad boy. And, if they were that into Bundy, he was he never was going to get out of prison. So they never had to really, be in interaction with him, but they just thought, oh, he's so cute. Well, he was brown eyes and, pretty hair and everything. And he wasn't the typical serial killer that you would imagine. So I think all these factors kind of go into play that's his persona, and that's what was happening at the time.
Yeah. Well, did you know of Ted Bundy before this happened? Did you watch, did you keep up with what was going on? Did you know he had escaped?
Yeah, when I was in 78 in college, I had no idea who or what a Ted Bundy was. I was going to frat parties and, drinking beer and having toga parties. And, it was just like, I was 21. It was like, it's just, it was so far away from my mind. And I don't think any of us, we never talked about it. And I just learned bits and pieces of him as the weeks went on. And I know when he was when he was arrested and being held in Tallahassee, the sheriff, Kim Casares, he was wonderful. He was great to Mom and Daddy and I, because he kept us up to date what was happening. And I knew that Bundy was not going to escape from him. It was just like he almost had a guard sleeping in his bed with him. It was just, he was not going to let him escape on his watch.
Right.
So, I felt safe once he was in jail in Tallahassee.
Yeah. What I find interesting is that you didn't go to therapy. You chose other ways to deal with it. And I find this so fascinating. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. My mama, being Cuban, is not an excuse, but we're strong. We're strong-willed, and it didn't even come up. Mama, I never even thought of going to therapy. Mama never mentioned it. It's just we handle things ourselves. We're strong people, and so I didn't go to therapy. I wasn't offered. I didn't think about it, but I had issues. I had issues both mentally, physically. And again, I didn't want to be scared of anything. I didn't want to be scared of anything. And one of my first issues I had was I felt like I had this big black thing on my back, like a monkey just strangling me. Yeah. And I needed that to go away. I needed that, and I didn't know what to do with it. And then I had a goal. I saw somewhere I wanted to go to. I wanted to reach it and enjoy it. And it was just a small little island. I had one palm tree and one sand chair that sat there. It was a low chair. And I wanted to get there so bad because it was so tranquil and so inviting. And it took me weeks to get there by baby steps. And I would just take baby steps. And I'd look behind me, and this black thing was baby steps away from me. And I took more, and I'd look behind, and it was further behind me. And I reached my island. I sat in my chair with my toes in the sand. I looked, and I couldn't see it at all. It had gone. It was gone. It wasn't going to get me and affect me anymore. It went away.
Yeah. Well, were you scared of men after what happened?
I didn't think I was afraid of men until everyone said, "Oh, aren't you afraid of men?"
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, And again, it was something. We had police officers at the front door and the back door, and I felt safe. But because of these questions and influences, I should be afraid. I decided I needed to see the most men as much as I could over, just to get it out of my system. So I ended up getting a job at a lumber yard in Miami. And I worked the cashier, and there were a lot of men that came through. And I think there was one that kind of made me uncomfortable, and I slid under the cash register. The lady behind me kind of took the sale, and then I stood up, and I was okay. And, I stopped working about maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I didn't want that to be my, end job.
Yeah.
And so I stopped because I didn't have any issues. But I did learn there's really cute guys out there that go along. So that was a little extra that I enjoyed. But it just, I wasn't afraid of men. It's like, not everyone's going to come in my room and kill me or try to. And it was just something that, I didn't feel as an issue.
Yeah. Well, did you date afterwards? And, did you want to date anybody after that?
When I joined the little chapel in the fall of 76, there was a group of us that hung out together. And during the year 77, we kind of dwindled down, and there was a guy I started going out with, and this is before the attack. So toward the end of 77, went home for winter break, went back, and that's when I was attacked in January on the 15th. So I wasn't really dating anyone. I knew David for a year, and we never dated one-on-one. It was just a church group until we got closer together. So 6 months after the attack in June, I was married.
Wow.
I was married to someone I knew less than a year. I cared for him. My parents and his parents thought that I would need someone to take care of me and never let anything happen to me again. And I don't know if anyone I had married would have made it through that time and through a marriage. I think it was just not correct in my head. And yet I went with it. As strong as I am, I went with it because my parents and his parents were so excited, and it made them feel good. I remember Daddy and Mom picked out my wedding dress, and it's not what I would have picked out, but they were so happy to do it. And it kind of made me feel good inside that now I could do something for them, which, is kind of a serious thing to do for them.
Yeah.
But we were married 6 years when I got divorced. So I didn't date anyone after that for a long time.
Yeah. Well, at what point did you start working at the bank?
We were married in June of 78. Right after we were married, I went and got a job at the bank. It was a small little store or a branch. And we lived near Century Village, which was a retirement village. So, we had elderly people that came in as clientele. And one day, this cute guy walked in, a suit and a briefcase, and he goes to the table, and he's looking around, and we're looking at him going, look, he's not in a walker. We're just like, excited. So he looked around and left. And we were all going, that was weird. So I was working there, and I had gone to lunch one day, and I was coming down to relieve the next teller. So I was going to be the next teller open. He was the next person in line. So I opened my window. He walks up to me, and he had like a small leather bag, and he unzipped it and opened it, and there was a gun in it. I don't remember if he gave me a note, if he asked. I have no idea what transpired other than that, other than I knew I was being robbed. Right. So I opened my teller drawer, and I'm looking at the ones in the 20s, and I'm thinking, which do I give first? Mm-hmm. They didn't teach this in teller school.
Right.
So I was figuring the 20s, I guess, and my knees were knocking. So as I'm looking at him, I'm facing the lobby. He's looking at me, facing the drive-through. The head teller called and said, this guy's weird. He's in the bank. Maybe you should check him out. Well, the police come in through the drive-through. He sees them, grabs his gun, his little bag, and runs out the door.
Oh my God.
Here I'm thinking, yeah, I got rid of him. Yeah, you'd be scared of me. I'm so bad. He just ran away because he saw me. It was actually the police behind me that got him. So that was kind of, it was exciting. The bank closed for the day, and no one got hurt. So the next morning, I got up and got dressed and went back to work at the bank. And people were like, oh my God, how could you do that? I'm like, it's the safest place I think I could be today. With cops all over the lobby, and I don't think anything's going to happen to me there today.
Yeah.
And then I just kept working there.
Wow. And I guess one thing I forgot to ask is, how did you feel the day that Ted Bundy was executed? Did you know that it was happening? And how did you feel?
Over the years, when he was on death row and he had excuses and stays of execution, we got called, every time there was going to happen, and then it didn't. So the night that it was actually going to happen in 89, they called us and said, my husband and I were at home in my little apartment. My son was staying with my mom because we didn't know, reactions. We didn't know what was going to happen. So it was Scott and I, and we were up pretty much all night, and the phone calls kept coming every couple hours. So I think it was at 6 o'clock in the morning, they called and said that he had been executed and he was dead. And we had TV on, and that's when we saw, everyone screaming either one way or the other. They wanted him dead or not. And we were sitting on my sofa. My husband had his arms around me. And I started to cry. I remember I just cried my heart out. I was wailing, and I was just crying. And in my mind, I was crying for all the girls that he killed and took away from all of us so soon. They were so young, and their families. And I cried for them and wanted to give them a voice. I always wanted to give them a voice, and I don't think I could well enough. So I cried for them and Margaret and Lisa and how they would be and who they would be today. And I didn't cry for myself. I knew I was okay, and I didn't need tears for myself. So a little while later, seemed like 5 minutes. My husband says, no, it was like 20. But I composed myself. I took a deep breath. I looked at him, and I said, I'm hungry. Let's go to breakfast.
Wow.
And that was the end of that feeling of this is happening. It was over. I mean,
Wow.
It was me again. I was at my island, except it was a restaurant eating breakfast.
Yeah. Well, so you got married to a great man named Scott.
Yes.
And you have a son.
Yes.
And how are y'all doing? And how did y'all meet? And just tell me y'all's marriage story.
We actually, in theater in high school, I met Scott Rubin. He was one of the students there, and we were real good friends. And that's also when I met Susie White, and she was the one that got me into Chi-O. So Scott and I were real good friends. We did, as a group, we did a lot of things together. So we got together. My son was 2 when I got divorced from David. So he was 2 years old, and I was a single mom for 5 years. And Mikey and I kind of grew up together, and everything I had been through with my ex, and it was just a peaceful, safe place to be together. And I wasn't supposed to have children because of lupus, and they said that could activate, and that wasn't good for me, as well as not going out in the sun. So I had Mikey, and when I met Scott again, we got that back together. Mike was 6, and it was a great time. Scott, actually, he came to lunch one day in Boca. He lived in Fort Lauderdale, which is about 40 minutes from Boca. He came to lunch and never left. I mean, we had lunch, and then he stayed, and we had steak, and then he stayed. And I remember as we got closer and closer, and Mikey started calling him Daddy, and we're looking at each other, and it just seemed so natural. We knew each other so well for so long. And I remember my mom would say to Mikey, so Michael, does Scott stay over at night and sleep with your mom? And every morning at 4 a.m. we would set the alarm. Scott would get his pillow and walk downstairs and sleep on the sofa, so that when Mikey came down to watch TV, Scott's always sleeping on the sofa.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is hilarious.
Cuban again. She was just really strict. So we did that for a long time.
Yeah. And
before
Scott,
we were married.
Yeah, Scott didn't even know what had happened to you, right?
Right. He had gone after graduation. He went to South Florida University, And then he had gone to Jacksonville University, and he was having fun. He was in college, and it was like Ted Bundy, it
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
in his circle at all. No one, imagined. And then when we met, I told him everything, and he just was in shock and awe. He goes, I never knew, the whole time we were dating, it was like you were normal, and I knew you're scarred, but you didn't have scars inside, it was just, and yeah, I'm normal.
Right.
It's just me. I was not going to let anything hold me back. And now that I met Scott again, it was like, whoo, I know I'm not now. There was a reason for going through everything.
Yeah, right.
So he's been so protective and so positive with me. And, when we got married and Mike joined us, and it was a great time. Again, life was good. Life was good again.
Well, did you ever tell, like, what age did you ever have a talk with Mikey about what happened, or how did he find out?
How did he find out? When we got divorced and Mike was 2, I remember giving him kisses one night as he was going to sleep, and the butterfly kisses, and he touched my scar, and he said, what happened to you there, Mommy? And I said, well, a bad man came into my house one night and hit me. I said, Mike, that's why I used to take him with me to lock the windows at night and lock the doors. So he saw the process, and, and then now he knew why. So I was always kind of with him like that. And he looked at me with his biggest big boy voice and said, Mommy, I will never let anyone hit you in the face again. And I think that was our first connection, that we were both going to be protective of each other. And over the years, I never told Mike. It wasn't going to be like, sit down, I got a story to tell you. It just didn't fit in our life. He was playing baseball and basketball, and, and to answer your question, he was 37 when he found out.
No way.
He knew that I had been attacked, and he had heard the name Bundy, but, it was just, he found out when the Rolling Stone article came out that was written by Tori Telfer, and it had come out last year, and his friends from high school called and said, oh my God, Mom, was that your mom? I mean, Mike, was that your mom? And he's like, what? What are you talking about?
Oh my God.
So he read the article and called me almost in tears going, oh my God, Mom. And I'm like, he goes, you were so normal. You made us cookies, and we had swimming parties, and we took people sailing. And I'm like, Mike, what, that's the way I wanted to be. I'm your mom, and that was life. He goes, I never knew. I'm like, no. I just wasn't there was not a time in my life where I wanted to not go to a baseball game to have him sit down and hear my story. We were always busy, and Scott was always a part of it and everything. So I didn't need to go there, but he's okay with it now. He calls me a lot, maybe too often.
I imagine he's very protective.
He lives in South Florida, and he's South Florida, and we have 2 grandkids. And I said, okay, that's enough. No more of them.
Oh my gosh.
So unfortunately, we don't see them often. They're 3 and 5 now. But we do the Zoom, and we connect that way, and it's fun. It's fun. But Mike has always been, not knowing, I think, well, all sons, I believe, are protective of their mom.
That's
and maybe
right.
I was just reading more into it, why he was, until one day I was out jogging. I was running around the neighborhood, and I did that a lot. And I didn't know, but Mike would follow me in his car and stay like a block or so behind me. And he had a baseball bat in his car. I never knew any of this, And one time I'm running, and a white van was running next to me and said something. And I said, I don't know, and went and came back around the block and came next to me again and exposed himself. Well, at that point, I just ran to the next house, the first house I could get to. And of course, they weren't there. Mike pulled up with his baseball bat, and the guy took off. And I'm like going, oh my God.
Oh my
I
gosh.
think Mike would have killed him. And Mike wasn't sure what had happened. He just saw Mama freaking and going to someone's house. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's protective.
Yes.
You know, he goes, I did that a lot. Not every time, but I just did a lot. And I'm going, oh.
Oh my gosh.
So he and I are very close. We're very close.
Yeah.
Actually, when they had their daughter, they named it Samantha Catherine. So
Oh my
that
God.
let me know how much I meant to, you know, my daughter-in-law and him. And it's just very nice. It's very nice.
Yes, that's so sweet. But I know that you went through something else. When did you find out that you had breast cancer?
I was going to the gynecologist, and Scott and I were going to try to have a baby. However, he had just flown that day to Finland, and he was getting his PhD, and he was working with other scientists over there, and there were Russians and Holland. I mean, there was a group of people that he was working with. So I went to the gynecologist, and he found a little lump about the size of your pinky. And he says, I think we need to explore this and find out, you know, what's going on. And I said, my husband just left. Let's wait till he gets back in a month. And he was like, oh. So we waited. And I didn't want to tell him because he was working until the last weekend. He went to Russia for a vacation or just a couple of days. And that's when I told him, you know, because I wanted him not to know before he came home, you know. I didn't want that initial wrath. So so I told him, and he almost came home that day, and his friend said, you know, there's nothing you can do. So he came home, and the next day we went to the hospital, and the pea size had grown now to a walnut. It had grown so fast. So we had decided if it was cancerous, you know, to go ahead and do a mastectomy. And it was. So I had a radical mastectomy, stage 2 breast cancer. And I had to have chemo again. And I was like, God, you know, my hair, please, you know. Yeah. And God almost has a sense of humor because I lost clumps of hair. You know, it wasn't bald again. It was just, you know, and I cut it short, and that was something to live with. But I was supposed to go with 9 months of chemo. And it was supposed to be every month, and then it had to wait longer because my white cells didn't jump up. But I remember I had a chemo one day, and then I was to have 8 more. I said, no, I have 1 more. And my husband's, no, honey. And I said, no, I have 1 more to get through. And when I get through that one, I have 1 more. Because if I thought I had to go through 7 or 8 months of chemo, you know, I just didn't want to go there. Yeah. You know, I just couldn't. So I just said I had 1 each time, and I could do 1. Yeah. You know? Wow. So, and then I had reconstruction after the mastectomy, and that took months. And, you know, finally I had reconstruction done, and we were done with that episode in our life. So my husband now said, you know, let's go ahead and have that baby that we wanted before all the cancer started. Yeah. So I got pregnant, and we were so happy. Scott doesn't have any kids of his own. He only has Michael. So I got pregnant pretty fast, and we were so excited. And in my 2nd trimester, I had a miscarriage. And everything I've gone through and everything I've done it, and I can do it. But I couldn't help that little baby. No matter what I could do for myself, I couldn't help the baby. And that was so upsetting. And every woman goes through a miscarriage. They know that feeling. And so about 6 months later, Scott and I tried to have a baby again. And I got pregnant. And I was in my 3rd trimester. And I lost the baby. And I couldn't do this again. And I told Scott, I can't do this. He goes, I'm not going to ask you to. So we got through that process of grieving and getting through everything. And then we decided to go out. We bought a sailboat. So that was the best thing we could do. That was a great distraction. It was a wonderful hobby, and Mike loved it, and it was just the best thing that we chose to do. And we do sailing. So it's
I love that.
life. And also now we ride motorcycles.
Oh.
It's like I used to tell my mama, if anything happens when I'm doing anything, just remember I wanted to and I was having fun.
Yeah.
She's like, oh God, motorcycles.
Yes. Oh my God.
So, yeah. So, life's good. Life's great. And I used to say in the beginning when things were happening, that you got to run really fast because there's going to be a hurdle in front of you. And once you jump that hurdle, you got to see what's on the other side because it's going to be good. Oh. And now as I'm getting older, you got to walk really, really fast and look behind the hurdle. Yeah. Because there's going to be something better behind there. Yeah. So, I just adapt that to how I live my life today. And, and I feel so sorry for people that have trouble to go through something and not come out of it very well. And it just hurts me, and I'm not saying everyone can do it, but I just heard that people go into a little state of mind or in a little box or, and they really can do it. And they trust themselves. It's like everyone has a strength inside of them.
That's right.
And if they look deep inside their soul, they find that strength and they pull it up and out. That's their strength. No one can take it away from them. And that strength can get them through a lot. They just need to hold on to it and know it's going to help them.
That's so true.
It might not be easy, and it's not going to be easy, but it's there. It's yours. Yeah. And no matter what you're going through, no one can take that from you. You just need to use it. And I wish I could help people know that and wrap my arms around them. And, I can't, but I just want them to know what I did and I got through it. And I hope people try. If they're in a box, they need to open a window in their little box so they can crawl out because they just need to. Your family needs to. People need you to. So that's the way I feel.
Yeah. So life is good for you now, and so
I mean, the pandemic and everything, it's gotten like 24 hours a day. We love it. We're having such fun. But we have a Rottie and a Yorkie, and we put our masks on, and we walk around the block. And since I have the lupus, my husband doesn't let me get out often, so he needs to get gas or something. I get to ride with him. I get out of the house. But, if I need something, we'll go out and get something. But on weekends, we go to McDonald's and drive through, and we sit and find a tree. We open the car doors, and we sit in the shade, and we turn on the radio, and that's our picnic.
That's so we have sweet. Weekend picnics. My heart.
We're making the best that we can, and we really haven't killed each other yet, or it would be news.
Oh my God. Is there anything that you didn't get to say that you want to say or talk about?
Just that thing that people feel they can't go on. And I never had survivor's guilt because I wanted to survive. I was going to survive. I was going to do good. And, I'm a victim, but I don't want to just be known as a survivor because I feel like I've thrived in so much of my life that, even a victim I feel is, it's weird to me because I'm a victim of Ted Bundy. I'm a victim of breast cancer. There's so many things to be a victim of. It's like, I don't want to be that either. I just want to be someone that lives life. I hope I'm a good person, and I want to play it forward. And, life's been good to me as well as I've gone through a lot. And, it's important to to help people know they can do anything. They can get out of their issues. I had one lady I met at a conference who was going through a divorce, and she came to me and I gave her a hug, and she's like, oh, they're walking all over me. And so she contacted me a couple of months later, and she says, I found my strength. I'm holding on, and they're not walking on me as much. And I said, you're doing good. She goes, I'm not there yet, but, I'm holding on to it, and I can, I'm okay now.
Yeah, those baby steps.
To hear that, just to hear someone doing that just makes me feel good.
Yeah, you're an inspiration, and I love you so much. I just can't even tell you, like, how much
Thank you.
I admire you and your strength.
This is just my little story. It's just, I tell Mike, it's just us. It's just my little story. Yeah. And he goes, no, I think it's a little bigger than that now.
Yeah, it is.
It is. It was, you cup your hands together to drink water. And, so I'm very humbled and very honored that people want to talk to me.
Of course we do. Oh, and it's
just, I'm very happy. And like I said, it's my story. It's what happened. It's my life. And it's been okay. It's been okay. I've gotten contacted by someone who wants to talk to me just about the breast cancer, know, and so, it's not like everything they wanted to hear. They just wanted to hear about that. And of course, the lupus groups and things. So, to take a part of that is good for me, because I'm not grouped together as Bundy victim.
Right.
There's different things about me that
exactly. And that's why I definitely wanted to highlight those things, because you are more than just, a victim of Ted Bundy or, that situation. You're so much more than that.
Yeah. Crime Con. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
I was in it last year, CrimeCon 19, and I was invited to do, it was Cheryl McCullum, who is a cold case in Atlanta, and Leslie Rule, Ann Rule's daughter, and me. And we were on the stage, and we had a little to do, and we all talked, because I actually knew her. She sent me some stuff. And so we talked about her, and then I had one-on-one time where I got up and, I had like 25 minutes to talk. So I tried to, and they're interested in Bundy, not everything else. So I kind of got the other stuff in, but when it was time for me, this is my second time I've talked. When I was through, I got a standing ovation.
Oh.
And I was just in tears. The room was supposed to hold 500 people, and they were lined up on the wall and sitting on the floor. And I have still shots. People took photos, people crying, and I keep saying it's amazing. So CrimeCon 20, they contacted me and said, get this, my fans asked me to do another session, and we want to give you an hour and a half solo.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, what? I said, well, yeah, I can talk that long.
Oh.
But of course we didn't do it, but it's cool. It's cool. I'm enjoying this. I've only given 3 speeches, and one-on-one, and I love it. I've done a couple, radio stations and TV and everything, but I just find it's so nice like this to talk to someone and, to hear about them and have them talk to me. And I was actually I was in contact with this guy, forgot his name, March something, just when they were closing down the airplanes. And he goes, well, this is not really a good time to set you up in an auditorium with people.
Yeah. Oh, goodness.
I'm like, yeah, well, that's my luck.
Yeah.
So, someday we'll get back into it. But I just love talking. And I'm not very shy.
Yeah, that's good.
You
That's a
might
good
know.
thing. That's a great
But
thing.
After this, we talked a bit off the record, and I'm so extremely lucky to call Kathy a true friend. One of the sweetest and most humble souls I've ever met. Thank you for listening to her story. Love you guys. Stay safe and stay healthy out there.